Yes, and welcome back, folks, to Truth versus News on August the 31st of the month. Yours 2/3 are gone, and I have to remind you of what we're saying here, that America is ruled by lies. What? And truth is completely absent, and the American population seems to tolerate it up until now. And ruled by lies is now the American way, and when truth is politicized, all is lost. I'm afraid that's where we are in this year of 2020. And it's been a rough year so far. Hopefully it's going to be better.
That's why we're here cutting through the lies, Don. You got it right. We're cutting through the lies. Meanwhile, a man in a Patriot prayer hat was shot dead in Portland during the violent clashes. The man was wearing a Patriot prayer baseball cap. This happened Saturday night. Fans of the president gathered in Clackamas to cruise around Portland. They were met by Black Lives Matter activists leading to scuffles, arguments, pepper spray. Saturday night marked the 95th straight night of unrest in Portland. Trump supporters across the country were out on Saturday afternoon showing their support for the president. BLM activists also rallied in Kenosha. Tear gas was used. Here we have the decedent in Portland. Very bad move by BLM. The Portland protest was one of many Trump supporters staged across the country. In Washington, D.C., protesters were tear gassed to push them away from the White House. In Kenosha, the protests continued, but were largely peaceful. A New York Times report on the scene estimated around 1,000 people showed up in Clackamas. We would like to get some fellow American patriots together for a Trump 2020 cruise rally to support our great president. Here you see their trucks were laden with flags. Here's a nice one with the image of the president on the front of a motorcycle, around 600 vehicles. It had the unhappy ending of a dead guy, but it's going to play out very badly for the BLM. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, we need to have a remember his name phenomenon. People should be reciting that, chanting that. There should be bowing of the knee and solemn remembrance to this young patriot who was shot and killed, murdered in cold blood for his political beliefs, for his rising up and celebrating America's virtue and celebrating the president who he equates to the virtue and success of America. He was shot for those beliefs, not because he was threatening anyone, not because he was tearing down statues, not because he was burning and looting and destroying targets, but because he was refusing to do all those things. Mm-hmm. The mob, the riots, the lunatics, the domestic terrorists in this country killed him. So there needs to be a pageantry and a recognition and a celebration for this young man. Perhaps Trump needs to lower the flag half-mast for the American patriot. I mean, we have that in the soldiers who were missing in war, missing in action. This young man gave his life. There should be a lowering of the flag, and he should be recognized as every other American. This crosses the line. What about the black man who was shot, who was supporting Trump? Remember him? He had a black or a Trump hat on, and he was murdered.
That was right in Milwaukee, Scott.
Yeah, that's right.
He was a champion of the neighborhood. Everybody loved this guy, but he was a black businessman who supported Trump. In a drive-by shooting, they just pulled up and shot him dead on the spot. That was a nasty event.
And
none of this is going to play out well for the Democrats.
Yeah.
David, your thoughts?
Well, real quickly, the media is handling this totally differently. When it's black, right? The media you don't even know the kid's name yet. Yeah, go ahead,
David. Your thoughts?
Sure. What surprised me about it's not burn, loot, and mayhem. Now it's burn, loot, and murder. Okay, yeah. So let's make that real clear. BLM is burn, loot, and now murder. Okay. And I agree with Scott that the president of the United States, when we find out this young gentleman's name, should honor him. We have this leading to scuffles. We have this fighting, enhancing, it's exacerbating, it's becoming more and more pervasive throughout the United States, but it's becoming more and more of a threat to each and every single community. Just last week, there was a the chief of police of the Los Angeles Police Department, BLM supporters showed up at his house, and they were hanging signs on the house of the chief of police for LAPD, and they called it a, quote, die-in, close quote. Remember the 60s, the, quote, love-ins, end of quote. So we have love-ins in the 60s, and now we have die-ins in the 2020s. So here we are, you know, another 3 generations removed, and we have die-ins. Well, if these young BLM if these BLM agitators and this ACAB and these ACAB agitators are showing up under this commitment to attend a die-in, you know, they may just get what they bargained for. You know, this is insane. But they are, I believe that they are fundamentally committed to overthrowing the rule of law in the United States of America. They should not be surprised at what happens to them.
Yeah, just as Scott was signing Patton, who said, your role here is not to die for your country, it's make the other poor bastard die for his country.
Yeah.
We're not going to allow these people to tear up the United States with impunity. If they think they can do it, they may have been tolerated by a bunch of gutless Democrat mayors and governors, but the situation is changing dramatically. The public is caught on. This is going to be really decisively settled, and I think there's going to be no question about how the public feels about it with the election forthcoming. Meanwhile, let's turn to the next. We have GOP making a compelling pitch for black voters. This was during the very first night of this spectacular convention just last week. Hard to believe. The hunt for black voters is a given for Democrats, but the first night of the Republican convention showed 2 teams are chasing the same prize. The effort showcased an impressive list of black speakers in prominent roles, with Trump slamming Joe Biden and the Democrats. Kim Clack, a dynamic young Republican woman running for the late Elijah Cummings seat in Baltimore, set the tone by declaring, the Democrats have controlled my city, Charm City, for over 50 years, and they have run this beautiful place into the ground. Abandoned buildings, liquor stores on every corner, drug addicts and guns on the street. That's now the norm in many neighborhoods. Herschel Walker, the football great, added his personal experience after what he called a 37-year friendship with Donald Trump. I take it as a personal insult that people would think I would have a 37-year friendship with a racist. Growing up in the Deep South, I have seen racism up close. I know what it is, and it isn't Donald Trump. It was really spectacular. Trump got only 8% of the black vote 8 years ago. It'd be something of an earthquake. If he could double that, I predict he will do much better than that. The result is Biden has refused to condemn the violence sweeping through the nation's urban areas, at least because it would be tantamount to calling for the police to crack down. And that in turn would infuriate the Black Lives Matter movement, which is Marxist and anti-police. That's not a problem on the GOP side. Speaker after speaker, including black ones, applauded the police and condemned the violence. Trump's decision to compete is actually in keeping with his inaugural address when he talked of the carnage in much of America, including its cities, and focused on boosting the economy and creating jobs for the underclass. He succeeded wildly. For much of the last year, unemployment rates for Black and Latino Americans hit record lows. Wage increases were often higher percentage-wise at the bottom and middle than at the top of the economic ladder. In short, Trump has a record of creating jobs for non-white Americans that any Democrat would die for. And now he's looking for their votes, a hunt complicated by the pandemic that has taken so many jobs. The first night of the convention also focused on defending the president's record combating COVID. Clearly stung by polls that shifted in Biden's favor as deaths mounted, the president adopted a more serious, sympathetic tone while still pushing for the economy to open as quickly as possible. Part of that effort involved videos showing Democrat governors, Gavin Newsom of California Andrew Cuomo of New York, Phil Murphy of New Jersey, complimenting the president for helping them during the worst days of the pandemic. Just a friendly reminder, we had more freedom under Great Britain prior to 1776 than we do now. We could collect rainwater, go fishing, own a property, start a business, renovate a home, build a home, use a transportation vehicle, get married, hunt, own a weapon, cut hair, sell a product, protest, grow food on your own property, set up a lemonade stand, sell food. In those days, you can do virtually none of these without being extorted by the government and securing a permit. These days, it's totally outrageous. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's it. The death of outrage, the death of modesty, the death of anything American and patriotic and decent is what the BLM, Antifa, looting, communist mission has become. And it is a threat to America. It's a domestic terrorist threat. I think there should be arrest warrants issued for George Soros and any of these international figures that may be financing these people. Rand Paul had a very good insight, and there should be immediate meetings between Rand Paul and the president and FBI and Department of Justice and the CIA for targeting these international infiltrators and terrorists and tracking them down, arresting their followers, and tracking their financing. It's very easy. There's a whole military wing dedicated to the counter-financing of terrorism. I did it when I was at U.S. Central Command, and I know exactly how to do it. So there's an interagency approach here that could swiftly strangle or kink the hose, where instead of a rush, you have just drips that are able to get through. And that would quell a lot of this stuff instantly. So I think the vast majority of people have awoken to this. They have rejected it, and they're going to continue to reject it. Their momentum is going to build. But this is the time to get very aggressive and shame these Democrat followers and Democrats who still utter this contemptuous, well, I just don't want Donald Trump in the White House. I just don't like Donald Trump. Well, that's not what the issue is. The issue is between being burned and looted and murdered, and your businesses and your buildings being destroyed, and your children being, worse than death, or standing on the side of law and order and preserving the American political experiment and dream. And that's what all of these blacks did when they got up there and said, Donald Trump is not a racist. He's done the best for black people out of every president that's ever sat in office.
That is absolutely true.
David. I think he's going to get, I would predict, 30% of the black vote. Not 8%, not 16%, not 20%. 30% of the black vote, I will predict, will vote for Donald Trump. Jim?
David, all out, do y'all predict, Scott, 40%. David, your thoughts?
Well, I would like to see the black community support the President of the United States with like a 90% turnout. I mean, look, the black community gets to make a political statement, gets to make a political choice, which is that the black community itself either votes for pacifism, the path to make change take place, and they get to vote out violence and rioting. It's that simple.
Yes.
It is really that simple. I think 100% of the black community should vote for democracy, which is having the changes take place without violent revolution. If they go to this revolutionary phase with their communism and their Marxism, their socialism, they are opting to change the way the government of the United States operates. I admire Kim Klacik coming out. I think she's articulate. She's very attractive. She did a nice political ad in the streets of Baltimore that I think fairly depicted the city, and she explained what's happened to the city. And this is right in Delaware. This is Biden's home turf. And then to have Herschel Walker come out and talk about President Trump as not being an or as not being a racist personality, if they can't take an endorsement from their own community, look, I have always admired and I have always loved people like Martin Luther King, Ella Fitzgerald, even Diana Ross. Okay. I just love the Black community, Motown Records and what it's given us in our own lifetimes.
Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell. These are among my heroes in my Parthenon of all time great Americans.
Yeah, they're just wonderful, wonderful. How about how about the voice of Aretha Franklin? How about that? Okay. All right. How about the voice of Aretha Franklin? How about Whitney Houston?
She had it right.
Wait, how about Whitney Houston? Oh my gosh. I mean, chills up and down my spine when that woman sings. This is what the Black community has to offer. And it has to offer on every front. Wonderful orators, wonderful actors, Denzel Washington, wonderful human beings. I mean, my gosh, I just can't believe the Black community as a whole says violence is the way to go. The ends are justified by the means. What is it? By any means necessary. I don't think so. That doesn't sell. And LeBron James should be ashamed of himself for wearing "by any means necessary" on one of his T-shirts.
Yeah.
It's
the
really
NBA is
disheartening.
self-destructing, David. They are self-destructing. They want Michael Jordan to give them advice, and he came in and he said, "Get back to work." And he turned around and left. Yeah. And instead, they reached out and asked Barack Obama what they ought to do. Yeah. And he told him, go whole hog with this political nonsense. It's going to kill the industry. They're going to lose their audience. We liked sports because it was non-political. And therefore, the contracts from the big networks are going to drop and their salaries are going to be killed. And they're going to put themselves really back in the poorhouse. And they're going to have deserved it. This is disgusting beyond words. Disgusting beyond words.
Sports and entertainment has always been an avenue for Black people to succeed and to do well. And they're getting new avenues. They're getting better educations. They're getting the professions are opening up to them. And all of these gifts of America are laid out in front of them. It's a bountiful country. I've worked and I've lived with black people my entire life. And, I honor them. They're my friends. They're my colleagues. I treat them respectfully, just like I treat everyone else respectfully. And, to take it into a state of nature on fighting and violence, it's abhorrent. So, I'll tell you one thing, though. For basketball, I'm out for the season. I'm not watching. NBA can come back. I'm done.
They've done it to themselves, David.
They've done it to themselves.
Very, very well said. You laid it out. I love it. Absolutely stunning stuff. Meanwhile, Tucker's reporting the facts, which don't seem to matter to any of the Democrats whatsoever. Only 10 unarmed blacks were killed in 2019 in U.S. by cops, and that was in self-defense. Look at this. This is a murder of blacks and whites in the U.S. in 2013. Blacks killed by blacks, overwhelming. Whites killed by whites, very modest. Whites killed by blacks, as high as whites killed by whites. But look, blacks killed by whites, tiny, minuscule. So this is what they're protesting. It's called special pleading, only citing the evidence favorable to your case and ignoring the rest. Number of people shot to death by the police from 2017 to 2020 by race, whites, overwhelming. Blacks, not so much. Hispanics, others unknown. Listen for a 4-year period. Here's the 2014 murder distribution in relation to the 2016 electoral map that shows the areas that are controlled by the Democrats are the areas where murders are proliferating. Areas like Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle. This is a democratic phenomenon because they're not willing to uphold the law. Here are criminal offenses in the U.S. by race per capita. You see, blacks are in red, overwhelmingly commit most of the crimes. A few categories, Native Americans, who have a genetic intolerance for alcohol, liquor laws, drunkenness, driving under the influence. But in every other category, blacks overwhelmingly are committing the crimes. That's why they're overrepresented in the prisons. They are committing the crimes. Here's New York crime statistic for 2014. Look at the arrests for murder, 62% black, 32% Hispanic. That's 94% of the murders by black and Hispanic. Shooting, 75% black, 22% Hispanic. That's 97% of the shooting, black or Hispanic. Rape, 43% black, 46% Hispanic. That's 89% of the rapes. If New York City were all white, rape would be down 83%, murder 91, shooting 96. It's outrageous. Really? Trump has appropriately observed that the cities with the most violent crime are controlled by the Democrats again and again, the sole exception being Jacksonville, Florida. His case is simply overwhelming. This is why the Democrats are going to go down to a massive defeat here in just a couple of months. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, I think you're right. I think it's very easily to see the separation between Americans ideologically and you know, the thing that is also still missing, of course, Jim, is the very real absence of spiritual authority by the pastors, by the churches, any of these organs that are supposed to be the repository for moral character and excellence and uplifting. We've got nothing but a bunch of game show hosts with, you know, sprayed hair and bleached teeth, thinking that they're up there to entertain and, you know, to titillate rather than to, you know, stand up and be a beacon, and a loud one at that, for the moral character of the nation and standing up against it. For standing up against the moral degradation that is trying to be introduced. And again, the churches in this country, I squarely laid the blame for the deficiencies in America, the open communism and transgender, lesbian, gay, homosexual agenda of the school systems, the atheistic agenda. All of that is because of the churches failing to organize politically and socially and stand up and refuse to allow their communities to bow down to this, and refuse to stand up to Big Pharma and their inoculations and their vaccine agenda. Nowhere do you hear any of this discussion in the churches. And when you try and bring semblances of this up, you are kicked out. You are chased out. You are told to be silent by a mob of effeminate beta males. And I saw this personally. So in a sense, the shutdown of America has shut down the idols of America. It shut down the sports. It shut down the movie theaters. It's shut down the false churches. And this is a reset time for all Americans to rediscover what is worth fighting for and defending, what is worth tossing in the garbage heap, which I would say all basketball. I think it's all a bunch of crap. And most of these other sports are a bunch of crap too. People don't have enough time to spend with their kids or grandchildren or go out in nature. You sit in front of a TV and watch other men acrobatically dance around. I think that's stupidity. I don't have any time or tolerance for that. And all these other leisure activities that America has made its idol have all been destroyed by the Democrats. And I think Donald Trump is, again, going to very clearly say, this is your choice. You want to preserve your nation and recover your leisure and activities and be able to walk around without a vaccine, without a mask, and have your kids return back to school, then vote for me. If you don't, if you want to live in a prison state, if you want to lie on your back and submit, if you want to get full of vaccines that are going to turn you into a hills have eyes deformity of humanity, then vote for Biden. And quite frankly, they'll stick a needle in my arm when they pry it from my cold, dead body. Jim?
I couldn't agree more. David, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I had a case in criminal court a number of years ago. I first started practicing, and my client owned a small battery exchange store down in southeast Los Angeles, south central Los Angeles. He was a black man, and I was representing him. And I said to the court, I said, you know, Your Honor, da 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 da. My client is trying to get his business started. He's a poor black man, and the regulations just came into effect. And the judge scolded me for mentioning that he was a black man. And I was kind of astonished by that. But I just stood my ground, and I said, well, my guy, regardless of his color, is not being treated fairly. Okay. And I stood in there and I went at it with the judge. Mm-hmm. And I went at it and I kept going at it and I kept going at it on constitutional grounds. I mean, he pissed me off. And I refused to give in. I told the court, you've got $125,000 bail on this guy. My guy can't make that. So I'm staying here and I'm arguing until you reduce the bail to something we can get him out on. And I argued all day. And I was getting encouraged by other lawyers who were just, you know, saying, hey, man, you're doing it as respectfully as you can. And they were encouraging me to keep on going. And I did. And I kept fighting them because I was fighting against the injustice of a judge for failing to consider the fact that my client was black. It was a small business. He was doing everything possible he could. He was doing everything he possibly could to stay in business. And it was adamantly and objectively unfair what the district attorney had done to him. They put him on the national news overnight. Okay. And it was just terrible. And we had just negotiated the day or 2 days before a federal resolution to his case because he was being charged under federal environment laws. And the state of California had just adopted their own environmental laws like that day. And so they were making my client the national bad guy. Okay. Put him in jail, 125. And I refused to leave that courtroom until the judge, you know, gave us reasonable bail. And I remember by the end of the day, we got him out on a $30,000 or $15,000 bail and, you know, finally got him free. But I went after that judge as a lawyer because, you know, it was fun. Okay. And I was right. And I knew I was right.
That's a real effort to get social justice and judicial reform, David. I compliment you for that. They should be praising you. You should be an example of what they want instead of tearing down communities, rioting, looting, and killing. It's outrageous.
Well, it's
good for you, David.
Well, what I want to mention though is, you know, all the statistics and the black on black crime and the Hispanic on Hispanic and, you know, cross-cultural stuff, you know, I get that. I understand those statistics. But the thing that we need to understand is that America preaches, okay, the promise of America, the promise of our education system is the instruction of wisdom. The thing that we can leave as a legacy to our children is the peaceful resolution of disputes. That's important. That's important for society going forward for millions of years, for thousands of years. It's what we've been taught. That you take the 10 Commandments as our guiding principles. The 10 Commandments, just follow them. And seriously, if you follow the 10 Commandments, you don't have to have all this law that we have in our books about, you know, this is an invasion or an intrusion or I mean, it's all law is built around violations of law. So it's discouraging, but I wanted to mention one thing. I have a friend of mine who is just registered in a local college, took a class called anthropology. And so I said to her, I said, she's a very good friend of my daughter's. I said, well, what are you studying? She goes, well, we're studying Nasarima. And I said, what is Nasarima? And she goes, well, it's American spelled backwards. Nasarima. And we're being taught how to look at culture differently. I said, what? I was shocked. I was shocked. I was stunned. If this is going on in our public education, if this is going on in our public schools, the Marxists are in, they are taking over, they're hitting the education system, and our country needs to wake up to that.
Oh, David, I think you made a very telling point. Quite a few, actually, very, very important points.
Yes, absolutely.
Meanwhile, UK government scientists admit the lockdown was a monumental mistake on a global scale. This is Mark Woolhouse, University of Edinburgh. Lockdown was a panic measure. I believe history will say trying to control COVID-19 through lockdown was a monumental mistake on a global scale. The cure was worse than the disease. I never want to see a national lockdown again. It was always a temporary measure that simply delayed the stage of the epidemic we now see. It was never going to change anything fundamentally. I believe the harm lockdown is doing to our education, healthcare access, and broader aspects of our economy and society will turn out to be at least as great as the harm done by COVID-19. That's Richard Sullivan, a professor of cancer at King's College London, previously warned there'll be more excess cancer deaths over the next 5 years than the number of people who die from coronavirus in the UK due to the disruption caused by the coronavirus lockdown, which is preventing cancer victims from getting treatment. Meanwhile, 1,000 German doctors say COVID-19 is 100% a scam. Close to 1,000 German doctors speaking out against the government's and WHO official narratives. Doctors around the world joining their movement. Oxford professor Carl Hennigan says people have become overly frightened of coronavirus. A professor of evidence-based medicine at Oxford said governments have failed to accurately communicate the actual threat posed by coronavirus. Meanwhile, shock report this week, the CDC quietly updated its COVID-19 numbers. Only 1,210 Americans died from COVID-19 alone. The rest had different other serious illnesses. Shocking. Today, we now have empirical data that the WHO, Dr. Fauci, to whom I refer as Tony the Rat, and Dr. Birx were all wrong. They were charlatans. They lied. It's happened again and again. We've been reporting on it virtually every single week. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, Jim, you're right. The moment this broke out, we characterized this as a psychological operation designed to massively influence the public and create a condition that made the public oppose Donald Trump. That was absolutely true. I didn't quite anticipate the religious cult theorems that should have been dissected and analyzed until I see them in play now. And that's a very real phenomenon. David Icke or Icky,
Ike,
and he has commented on it. I thought he was absolutely true. And this is a mind virus. This is a manifestation of mental reorientation and rewiring. And it's a religious cult. There's false virtue. There's wearing of a mask to denote your submission and thereby your superior virtue somehow. But it really masquerades the cowardice of people that have nothing in them to stand up and defend their rights for. They have no gumption whatsoever. And you see that manifesting in their attacking of people who don't wear the masks, and all the physiology is there. The impossibility of a virus being held back by a mask, and the absence of a virus in general. Of course, the 5G technology influence has also been identified, and I think that's worth examining and fully analyzing. But the response is right on, and doctors all over the world, as you've just cited, are calling attention to that. The mainstream media in the United States is not talking about it, which again shows me if you're ever going to have a French Revolution and execute people by guillotine, it's these plastic-haired, bleach-teeth news people that arrogantly tell lies, roll cat shit and powdered sugar and feed it to people, calling it a donut. All of these people need to be, fully thrown out. Tucker Carlson's doing a good job. That's why it's all going his way. But all of the manifestations of COVID-19 by Fauci and Blix and all of them, shutting down the government, shutting down business, shutting down people's leisure, has had massive negative consequences on people and especially children. Here's what Trump needs to do. He needs to have military surgeons and doctors in uniform. He should have had that from the beginning. I'm sick and tired of telling him good ideas and they're not doing them. He needs to have military doctors standing next to him on the podium, and military doctors with the full weight and authority and the pageantry of the United States uniform saying, this is not what it seems to be. This is not as bad as we're led to believe. This is not going to improve your lives, wearing masks and all this other stuff. You have to get back to work. That authority, that bearing that military leaders have automatically comforts all people. That's why the top people, the top thing that Americans treasure is the military, because their sons and daughters in the military. And a military person, Jim.
The problem, Scott, is that he as commander-in-chief would be viewed as ordering them to do it. There are other options we're about to address. I mean, I get your point, but I think
here's the final thing. The military guy has to go in and tell Fauci and Blix, you're full of shit, and I'm telling you that, and I'm going to have you investigated. That turns them backwards and retreat, and psychologically, that's what you have to do to Fauci and Blix.
I think it's the right idea. I have a suggestion, a different suggestion of how to handle it. David, your thoughts?
Well, I think, just alone, based on the statement by Dr. Anthony Fauci that the Trump administration is going to experience a pandemic, I think surprise pandemic. That on its own, that statement on its own demands a full and exhaustive investigation by the Department of Justice. Okay, plain and simple. That statement on its face is enough to warrant and to justify a comprehensive investigation by the United States Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, United States Marshal's Office, seizing records and doing so expeditiously. Number one. Number two is, I think George Will made the comment about moral exhibitionism years ago. I forget what the issue was for the life of me. I'm going to have to look it up one day, because he summarized it so articulately. It was quite elegant. He was talking about this moral exhibitionism by taking this stand, and you are exhibiting to the world your virtue and your beauty and your compliance. And gosh, I forget the issue, but that's what masking.
Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton.
Was it Lewinsky and Bill Clinton?
It was.
No, I think it was before that. It was some other issue, but I'll check on it.
There was a time when George Will was saying things that were highly sensible and even wise.
Yeah.
Wise.
So he made it. He pointed out. He gave me for life the two terms moral exhibitionism, and that's what we see with the masking that's going on. In these revelations by the CDC, if they are true, it's shocking. If the doctors are correct and the mainstream media is wrong and the politicians are wrong, well, I think they need to be held to account for the damages inflicted on the people of the United States of America. Just a quick second. I have friends of mine who've been fired. I have friends of mine whose lives have been ruined. I have friends of mine whose kids are unemployed. I have friends of mine who are losing their homes. I have friends of mine who can't make their payments on time. I have friends of mine who are in desperate straits because of this COVID-19 pandemic. And I think you know, give me a special team of prosecutors. Give me 10 different researchers and give me a team of guys, and I'll tell you damn right well, we'll find out if this thing was real or if this thing was false. And I believe it's a psychological operation. I believe that California, the Democrats, and a few others were a little too close to China, and that's where the people of the United States have been exposed to this bioweapon, which may turn out to be a bunch of bio stank.
Yeah, you're 100% correct, David. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. The whole thing was fabricated, phony, and fake. Bill Gates, Henry Kissinger, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, all deeply involved. Now, this is the approach, Scott, I suggest is the alternative. You got this brilliant epidemiologist at Yale, Dr. Harvey Reich. He said Fauci and the FDA have caused hundreds of thousands of deaths. He means tens of thousands of deaths that could have been saved by HCQ. He is the guy, I believe, that Trump ought to bring into the White House as a special scientific and health advisor to overrule Tony the Rat. Here's what you do. Harvey Reich, epidemiologist, over 300 peer-reviewed articles, hardly got the CV of a crank who hates science, but the mainstream tries to dismiss them because he's opposing what they're seeing. In a world that's come down so aggressively against the potential of any benefits of HEQ, he's been swimming against the stream. He's gone so far as to say he's never seen a study for any other medication that's shown stronger indication for the benefits of use than he has for the data associated with the use of this medication, HEQ, as a treatment for COVID-19 patients. His opinion about the flaws inherent in other studies that don't support the use are explained on the show, but this would be the ideal treatment. Meanwhile, doctors have sent an open letter to Fauci about HCQ. Since the start of the pandemic, hundreds of doctors have successfully used HCQ to treat patients symptomatic of COVID-19. In frustration at the media negativity about this safe, effective, and inexpensive medicine, American doctors have sent an open letter to Fauci, who is just a disgusting miscreant. Here's the American thinker, how Fauci's stubbornness is costing lives. And there I added the photograph of Barack Obama with Anthony Fauci and Melinda Gates, apparently taken in the National Institute of Health Bio Lab in 2015, 2 years before Fauci would announce the surprise pandemic prediction in 2017. Imagine, if you will now, a virus so dangerous you have to be tested even though you had it. I think that sums it up. Scott, your thoughts?
Wow, you guys. Well, Scott.
You're on me.
Yeah. I think you're right, Jim. That's a very good counter solution. I would empower that invasion with logic, with the artillery of military doctors and uniformed, military surgeons and stuff. There's just something there that gives it the flair. But you're right. That individual that you're identifying, Dr. Harvey Reich, is brilliant, and I think that is exactly shit. Don't just, yeah, you got to sideline Fauci, but replace his ass. He shouldn't be on there in the first place.
But you override him, Scott. He's got Social Security, civil service protection. You override him by a higher level advisor who is far more competent and expose the corruption of Fauci. You bring him in as a special advisor to the president.
I agree.
Not even Congress can override that appointment.
I agree, but also what David said is very accurate. There should be a full investigation into entire comments, because he has. Yeah. It's almost like when you apply for a security clearance, you have to empty your pockets out of everything that you are and everything you've done and everybody you've ever known, and every single thing comes into the play. This guy Fauci should have the same sort of exhaustive probing. Or by an investigation, because he has either grossly betrayed and manipulate the country and warrants criminal action, or he's been very convenient and economic with the truth. Jim?
Well, you can go to jimtheconspiracyguy.com and look at my very first show on 24 May about coronavirus, where I lay it all out, how this thing was all faked and staged, and the crucial role of Bill Gates. It's all there as a roadmap. What you need to do is have a legal investigation by the Department of Justice. David is spot on, 100%. David, your further thoughts?
Well, let's go to Anthony Fauci, and let's go to Nancy Pelosi, because those two, to me, seem to be in bed together.
It's a repulsive thought, but yes.
Okay. Look, I believe, quite frankly, that the citizens of the United States of America should invest in a comprehensive investigation of Dr. Anthony Fauci and his ties to Bill Gates and his ties to the Obama administration.
Absolutely.
Okay, look, it's what everybody always says: if you got nothing to hide, there's nothing to worry about.
Right.
Okay, if you got something to hide, it's something to worry about. So, why don't the people of the United States just say to the President Trump, we would like Dr. Anthony Fauci, based on his statement, to be subjected to a completely comprehensive investigation and review. Yeah.
Make a White House petition.
Like a White House petition.
There's going to be a RICO fraud involving all these parties we're talking about to loot the country and to make vast profits on a vaccine that's going to actually damage the American people. Bill Gates is in it for the money. He won't even allow his own family to be vaccinated.
Wait, it's not going to damage the American people. It has already crippled.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Crippled America. It has crippled America. Now, I'm calling on every single citizen to petition the President of the United States to ask for a comprehensive investigation of Anthony Fauci based on the statement that he made in 2017.
I love it. It's a great idea. It's a great idea, David. Scott, I'm sure you agree. This is really very appropriate.
I do. It's a legal investigation. It's a background check. It's a betrayal of the trust. It's an injury, a willful injury, and racketeering, and really, it's guilty of treason. This is something guilty of treason. If everything that we're saying is true with Fauci, he's a traitor and should be executed as such. And a criminal investigation would yield that, or it would exonerate him. And I think the overwhelming evidence is that he would be found guilty.
Not much doubt about it. Meanwhile, we're entering into a war period. Catherine Austin Fitts warns nothing will ever be the same. Get this. Fitts lays out the so-called reset you've been hearing about. We're in the process I would recall as a global reset. The entire financial system is being reset, but the new system is 100% digital. The new system, according to Fitts, will be a top-down control system where tyranny will be the key feature. So the tyranny that's coming and the printing that's coming is greater than anything we have seen so far. We are seeing money is going into the economy now that's extraordinarily inflationary. Fitts describes the over situation. We're basically entering into a war period, and it's dangerous. There are many different layers, but this is what World War III looks like. The people running things and centralizing economic power and control are saying we don't want to share the subsidy anymore with the general population. It's a spiritual war between good and evil. Part of the war spreads out to invisible technology like mind control. Fitts says gold and silver will be assets to hold in the future. You're going to want simple assets they can control that are not digital and try to keep them outside the system. Fitts is basically predicting higher highs and lower lows for gold and silver in the future. One of my best commentators on my blog reports. Quite a daunting video from Catherine Austin Fitts, the essence of which is that we're undoubtedly heading for a digital currency and totalitarian world order. This COVID nonsense is an integral part of the reset. Her underlying attitude, though she does not actually express it, is that it's unstoppable. She has no timeline. Could be tomorrow, next month, next year, or not for 10 years. We all know it. But have we considered the real consequences, not the least of which is total and complete control over our lives? How do we stop it? Have we heard Trump's take on any of this? I have not. Anyone else? Meanwhile, here it is, laid out. It's simple. I chip all of you, make society cashless, and put all the money on the chip. Then you will do exactly as you're told, or we turn off the chip and you don't eat. Scott, I think that's exactly what the master plan, what they have in mind for us. Your thoughts?
Well, we see all of this, a natural avalanche of overwhelming trauma that the Democrats are seeking to suffocate the American people with. The COVID-19, the Ukraine gate, the Russia collusion hoax with Mueller, the COVID-19, the George Floyd riots, now these riots being translated into an endless rebellion masquerading as anti-fascism, where they burn and loot and murder. And think that the American public are going to be traumatized and tortured so much that they're eventually going to not vote for Trump and vote for Biden. We just need to twist their arms hard enough. We need to shut down their schools and churches and businesses, and they'll give up. No, they'll turn around, free themselves from your stranglehold and strangle and kill their attackers. That's what's happening to the Democrat Party. People are turning away and attacking them with their vote. And the Democrats, of course, Judge Napolitano and others have predicted that the Democrats are going to try and get the mail-in ballots and the mail-in voting to clog up the electoral process, then declare Nancy Pelosi as the head of the Speaker of the Congress is going to be the natural president. And I don't think that will be allowed. I think the American people will recognize that we are in a civil war. Trump is Lincoln. And as Lincoln, Trump needs to finish the Civil War by exposing and prosecuting and executing where necessary these domestic enemies.
If the vote isn't resolved by 20 January, the date of inauguration, she, as the Speaker of the House, becomes a president pro tem, as it were, of the United States.
Yeah.
That must not be allowed to happen. David, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts first as to the reset. Clearly, there's a Buffalo Springfield song way back in the 60s. There's something happening here that ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. I remember those. I remember the 60s really well. And there's something going on, okay? There's movement. There's a handful. I don't know how many people are at that table. I don't know if it's nations at that table, if it's bankers at that table. I'm not sure who's there, but there are people at a table who are designing this, okay? And this may very well be a plan and a plot to take over the United States, to take over North America, to take over North America and South America, and to take over Europe, and to bring it into harmony with what they think is what the people want. And I can assure you, and I will testify, it's not what I want.
Right.
And they're not going to do it. If they're going to, they're going to have to walk over my dead body to get it.
I think you're right, David. I think you're right. I have one more story before I gather your final thoughts, but I think the situation is this. COVID is murky. This financial research is murky, but law and order is clear cut, and it's going to make the decisive difference. Every American sees that the future of the nation is at stake here, and they cannot support the lawless Democrats. They can support the President of the United States who's trying to do something about it. Here's the final story before I get your final thoughts. Updates on the Sandy Hook lawsuit, prediction by Robert David Steele. While Alex Jones is rolling over and playing dead against multiple lawsuits, Jim Fetzer is fighting back. I predict he will win. I'm also learning there's a massive class action lawsuit emerging against all officials, local, state, and federal, and all parents and others who perpetrated this falsifying event. then proceeded to abuse multiple court processes, commit perjury and fraud on multiple courts, in passing stole via charity fraud over $30 million from the public with a false narrative about a false flag event. The culpable individuals probably think they have immunity from operating with national security warrants of indemnification. They are in for a very, very nasty awakening and will, I believe, be harshly treated by the public in a manner similar to how the Norwegians treated Quislings. They all betrayed the public trust in the most horrific manner possible, creating a national trauma for venal objectives. I think that's exactly right. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I welcome your thoughts. Comment on that and the other issues. Scott, we have a new report about the Michael Flynn case where the court appears to have made the outrageous move of rejecting the recommendation of the Department of Justice. Tell us.
Well, the court just ruled today that by an 8-2 decision that the judge does have the power to inquire and question the Department of Justice about their case. That's going to be it's going to be taken to the Supreme Court, and I anticipate, unless Judge Roberts, in his sodomite ways, is going to betray the president and betray conservatives yet again. But if not, it'll go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court should overrule the lower court and say, this is all about executive powers and separation of powers, and the Justice Department, which is a branch of the executive power, has sole power to prosecute a case or not. And the judge can't do anything. He is the Maytag repairman. When they pull out, he just goes back to clipping his fingernails at his desk. So I think that's going to inevitably come. But in the meantime, hot dog, this gives us more opportunity to submit additional supplements and addendums to the amicus brief and multiple other amicus briefs that say, hey, this is all about General Michael Flynn being targeted when he was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency for a report that he received called Shell Game, whistleblowing report about terrorist financing involving the Clinton Foundation, Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, Loretta Lynch, and the Department of Justice, John Brennan, Covington and Burling.
Let me give you some new information. In the 3 shows I've done on Shadowgate, the second, which was last Sunday, a week ago Sunday, we talked about the conversation of the whistleblowers with Pete Santilli. I have mixed feelings about Pete, but in this case, he was brilliant. Among what emerged was a conversation had taken place between the Chief Justice of the United States and John Brennan, the Director of CIA, about what could be done to forestall Trump being inaugurated. It is disgusting. You want to look at that, Scott. It's a huge matter. I have the whole Santilli thing on my site on BitChute. David.
Yeah, I listened to the argument at the Court of Appeal. I'm not surprised by the ruling, but I think Scott's right. Let me walk it out 1 second. Sure, the judge has the right to inquire of the United States why they're dismissing the case and upon what grounds. But as Scott said, once the United States dismisses the case, it's like Yogi Berra. When it's over, it's over.
Thank you. Wonderful. Don, take us out.
Yeah, this is Truth versus News on August 31st. 2/3 of the year is over, and what a great show this has been to expose what's really happening in these crazy days of summer. So thank you so much for watching Truth versus Official Facts and Truth versus News Incorporated. And we'll see you next week. But share this. I think this was outstanding. You gave me chills, guys. You guys were really outstanding today. Wow.
In 2010, they had the Rockefeller Foundation script a plan to introduce martial law and a permanent method for total control of the citizenry. In this plan that they disguised as an academic scenario, as they called it, the method they would use to gain complete prison-like control of the entire population was to infect them with a devastating biological pandemic, and then, under the guise of protecting us from this threat, they would would be free to implement their final solution, a prison state.
It's called Lockstep, a world of tighter, top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership, with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. In 2012, the pandemic that the world had been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike 2009's H1N1, this new influenza strain originating from wild geese, even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months, the majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on economies. You can see the agenda, just naked, raw, naked control agenda written down, and it's anybody's guess how this becomes effectuated in real life. So whether this is written specifically as marching orders, or whether people take it upon themselves in the intelligence networks to say, okay, well, this has been produced, so this is the plan here. But these narratives have to be written in advance. Okay, the pandemic also had a deadly effect on economics. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt, which is what they want. They want a completely isolated world, right? Debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. And they want you at home in your house in front of the TV. Then they got you, because once you watch the TV, they own your soul. Even locally, normally bustling shops and offices sat empty for months. Okay, so I love how they talk about it in the past tense.